Hey, Alex.
Yes, Sarah?
Have you heard that saying that comparison is the thief of joy?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of true.
It really is.
Uh-oh.
What?
I think this whole episode is going to be us comparing things.
Fun. Welcome to Mistakes Were Made, a podcast about non-monogamy for messy people like us. I'm Sarah. I'm a queer, non-monogamous therapist.
And I'm Alex, her husband, the father of her children, and a communications professional.
And I'm Jessica here, resident monogamist, producing the podcast, and mostly off mic today until we get to our lightning round at the end.
I always love this little note that lingers here on the script. And I'm Alex. I'm a man.
Yes, I am. And today we have two guests.
Welcome, Tyson and Rozie, to the show. We're so happy to have you here today.
Good to be here.
Yep, good to be here.
Why don't we start by, I'm realizing I didn't download an official bio for the two of you, so I'm going to just ask you to introduce yourselves a little bit, and why don't we start with you, Tyson?
Oh, okay.
I saw the two of you jockeying there, and you know what? Rozie elbowed you first, so Tyson, you're going first.
All right. So I am Tyson. I am a ex-Christian church dropout, polyamorous, event host, fairly involved in the community here in Seattle. So yeah, that's kind of my quick little bit about myself.
I really like that. Does that fit on a business card? You have that on LinkedIn?
Church dropout. Well, it's on LinkedIn and a few dating apps as well. So.
Okay, nice. Welcome, Tyson. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Rozie.
My name's Rozie. I'm a queer polyamorous organizer in the community.
Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And today we're talking about something. So Alex and I have been threatening to do this episode.
Yeah.
I feel like
Trying.
Yeah. For like a year and a half. Doing kind of a deep dive on the experience of being solo poly and talking about what it means, what it's like for folks, some of the things that come up when solo poly people are dating people who are not solo poly.
And we met Tyson, I think, under the auspices of seeing if we could have you on as a guest about something completely different. Mm-hmm. And then we hit on this topic idea because I think we've been trying to do this kind of episode, but the only people that we had to do it were people that we were dating. And it seemed like maybe that wasn't the best idea. So
that's a different vibe.
Yeah, would be a different vibe. Yeah, more like a live couples therapy kind of vibe, which I guess we do sometimes. So anyway, we're super excited to be able to talk about this. And when it came up in our coffee that we had a couple weeks ago, it just seemed like there was a lot to talk about. There's a lot of material to talk about, especially between coupled non-monogamous people like Sarah and I, and solo poly non-monogamous folks like Rozie and Tyson. So this is it, the smackdown.
There, that's the phrase, the smackdown.
The smackdown. Okay.
So our audience spans folks who have been practicing polyamory for a long time, people who are new to it, people who are curious, and so we always like to start with terms and defining the terms a little bit. Would you all help us out and talk to us a little bit about what does solo poly mean?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to what it means for me. I can't speak to what it means for everyone. For me, it's a cliche, but it means I'm my own primary. So I don't really answer to anyone else. I get to make my own decisions about dating and other parts of my life. So a lot of people will kind of get into the nitty-gritty of can you be poly if you live with your partner, or solo poly rather, or can you be solo poly if you're married? And I'm not really here to weigh in on that because that's pretty controversial, but I can speak to what it's looked like for me as my relationships have evolved over the years. Interesting.
Yeah, I really like that definition of solo poly as being your own primary partner, and I was not familiar with that controversy. And of course now I'm like, that's all I want to talk about. But we'll put a pin in that for now. What about for you, Tyson?
I think much of the same. I think it's about really establishing my own, for me personally, it's about establishing my own sense of independence, my own sense of autonomy, my own sense of self-love and self-trust by being in relationship just with myself, while also exploring a relationship with others. But like, I was married for 10 years, so it's kind of, for me, it's a journey of building that independence again. So.
Yeah. You know, I feel like it's important to ask, in part because I remember wondering this early on myself, like, what's the difference between being solo poly and like being single and dating around?
I think there's a lot of important differences. So me being solo poly, when I'm dating, I'm still looking for lasting connections and building community. And I feel like if you're monogamous and dating around, you're just looking for like that one person to hop on the relationship escalator with. I also wanted to add in, like, you can still be in long-term relationships and be solo poly with multiple people, right? Versus if you're just dating around in the monogamous sense, like, you're hoping to just eventually, I mean, either you're not dating seriously, if you're, I'm not sure how to define dating around, if you're dating seriously or if you're just, like, hoping to find that one person.
So there's, like, a question of, like, intention. I think that's where maybe, like, sort of people in the general kind of casual, not thoughtful monogamy framework might just be thinking about, like, if you're just like, okay, I'm just like dating around, I'm not really like looking for anything right now. The assumption is, well, you're always kind of looking for something, right? You're gonna accidentally meet the right person and then hop on that escalator.
Yep.
And if you're solo poly, you're like, I'm doing this on purpose. I'm intentionally trying to like do the things that the two of you just described. Kind of like you talked about, Tyson. I can't remember exactly the words that you used, but like talking about self-love and like investing in yourself intentionally, thinking about being with yourself. And you're, Rozie, you were talking about like building long-term relationships with multiple people. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Did you want to say anything?
No, I think you're right on the money there. I think it's about intention. It's about what you're looking for, whereas I think I view solo poly as like the intentional effort to build a web or constellation of connections that are free to be whatever they are without the limitations of, you know, of having a nesting partner. You know, I have the complete freedom to invest however I would like to, whatever feels right for that relationship. And so I think it's different from dating around, because like you said, Roz, dating around is about trying to find one person still. You're just dating a lot of people at that same time. So at least that's how I would understand it.
I got it, because I always have to, and every podcast, I have to bring up attachment, too.
Already,
I know. That might be a record. I haven't brought up capitalism yet, but it's coming. Because I feel like...
Now I'm thinking about how you would...
I'm gonna do
ahead.
it. I'm gonna segue. I feel like attachment is a piece of this as well. And I remember, Tyson, you and I were talking about this in our conversation when we met, that a common misconception folks might have about solo poly people is that they're pursuing relationships that aren't attached or aren't seriously attached. And that, I think, is what you're speaking to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely looking for attached relationships, and I think that's something that there's an assumption that, I think especially also being a man, like there's an assumption that like, oh, I just want simple, casual, non-attached, and it's like, no, that's not me. So yeah.
Okay, a second ago you said something, you said the words like talking about a nesting partner, which, just to like unpack the term, that means like basically somebody that you live with, right?
Yep.
And then you said the word, and then you talked about like freedom in relation to that, or like the sort of implying that like having a nesting partner would like impinge on your freedom. I don't know if that's the right use of the word impinge, but whatever. So talk about like how that relates to attachment.
How that relates to attachment?
Yeah, like how do all those things work together? Like, maybe having a nesting partner means a little bit less freedom, but you can still have non-nesting partners that are attached. Yeah. Like, how does that kind of play out for you, or how do you think about that?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I think for me, as someone who is anxiously attached, the benefit I get from a nesting partner is having that consistency, that daily consistency. And even, like, for me, I'm learning that being able to see someone and have a conversation with them face to face is such an important piece for me to feel comfortable and safe. And so, like, the benefit of having a nesting partner is like you have that daily contact, right? You have that daily, hey, things are okay, I can see your face, like we're good. The challenge on the other side of not having nesting partners, that like so much of communication is through texting or through phone calls, and not necessarily through like, I'm not seeing that person on a regular basis, so it kind of can be more anxiety inducing. But on the other frame of mind of that, of like, there's also the challenge of not being able to have that freedom and like feeling like, I think I because I'm anxious, I'm worried about upsetting people, and I think I'm typically worried about infringing on someone. And so like if I have a nesting partner, it's like I may not be as honest or open of like, hey, I want to have someone over, like, so I think it would be harder for me to navigate like the having someone else living there. But if it's just me, it's just me, and I figure out it's just me, and it's about what I want. That's not necessarily making sure a nesting partner is comfortable, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it starts to. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I hear just some self-awareness around like the vigilance that can come with preoccupied and anxious attachment. And if you're living with someone, as someone who also identifies that way, if you live with someone and you're in that kind of hypervigilant state, or you're really trying to figure out how to dismantle that, you can just be like constantly vigilant about the other person being okay, and it's exhausting, and it becomes hard to create the space to actually check in with yourself and understand how you feel and what you want. And as you're also exploring non-monogamy, that can feel really difficult and claustrophobic and overwhelming.
Yeah, that's actually super insightful. I've found my attachment style varies depending on the partner. So I've found myself securely attached, anxiously attached, avoidantly attached. It just really depends on the dynamic with the other person. And now that you say that, I'm thinking about a time when I did live with a partner, and I was more anxiously attached, and it was a struggle. And once we sort of separated a bit more, I was able to have that space to form a secure attachment.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I love hearing stories of people moving through like attachment patterns that feel unhealthy or hard and finding ways to like reach an equilibrium together. I think that's really cool, and a good example of what non-monogamy can provide specifically. Yeah. Okay, well, maybe that's a good moment to dive in and ask you all about your journeys here. How did you come to find yourselves identifying as solo poly? Take us back as far as you want to go and bring us to today.
Yeah, I can go pretty far back. I started dating polyamorously in early 2017, and I was single at the time, and I was on OkCupid, which I had already been on and off of since I was like 19. And I met my long-term partner about a year later, and he was also solo poly at the time. And about 6 months after that, he met his other partner, and spoiler alert, we now have a baby together, and I helped them raise their child, and we have this really close connection, even as our like relationships have sort of changed over time. But in between that, there's been just a lot of stuff happening. I've dated a lot. I've dated a lot of married people. I've dated a lot of single people. I actually, in 2019, my mom died, and I met someone who I sort of impulsively moved in with, and they were a part of our community for a little while until that sort of fell apart. But in 2020, I was living with them still, even though we had broken up, and the pandemic happened. And so my long-term partner, who I met in 2018, his partner and ended up moving in with us because we were all spread out across I-5, and we were worried that like we wouldn't be able to travel during the pandemic. And my partner's partner had a 3 or 4 year old at the time, and we didn't want to leave them high and dry and without support. And so we all ended up moving in together.
Wow.
Which in a little 2-bedroom house, which was very chaotic and it was very difficult. And it sort of solidified for me why I like my space and being alone. So in 2021, in January, I got my own place because the owners were selling that house, and my long-term partner and his partner had moved out and gotten their own place, which was its own sort of can of worms. But I got my own apartment. I got a pandemic deal on it, and I haven't really looked back since. I really love living by myself. I actually broke up with my long-term partner this past fall, but we had our baby. My metamor, his other partner, is the one who carried and had our baby, and we're all co-parenting together full-time. So yeah, I've seen a lot.
Wow. That is quite a journey. Okay. First of all, I just wanted to say, like, we could do an entire podcast just about people's pandemic relationship stories.
Yeah.
There are so many wild and interesting ones, but I would say the overwhelming theme for a lot of people is that they found themselves. That it was messy and it was difficult, and that was also an opportunity to find themselves in a way.
Yeah.
So I have a bunch of things that I want to ask Rozie about based on that story, but I want to actually pop over to the two of you and see where you would like to go next.
I think follow-up questions are appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah, ask
cool.
them. You should ask your questions.
Go ahead.
I have a clarifying question about so right now you are co-parenting with your partner and
my ex-partner.
Your ex-partner.
My ex-partner and his partner.
Got it. Okay, cool. So you're not partnered with either of those people, and you're kind of dating solo poly and taking care of parenting this kid with them. Yeah, cool.
I think the thing that I'm really interested to ask more about is you kind of glossed over, you're like, it was chaotic when we all moved in together, and through that chaos, it solidified for me that I am solo poly. And I'm like, tell me more. My little therapist brain was like,
Yeah.
And?
I had never lived with a partner before that, and I had already sort of assumed I was solo poly, just starting from the perspective of dating polyamorously while I was single, and then sort of going through that transition. So I had been doing that for 3 years by the time 2 years by the time I moved in with the person I moved in with, and we all ended up just being so close together in this house. And I don't know, I grew up in a very quiet environment in the country with a very quiet family. I have one sibling who's 8 years older than me. And so I was very overwhelmed. And I was also working through a lot of personal stuff. So around that time my therapist was like, I think you have ADHD because you're showing me all the signs, the textbook signs of a woman with ADHD, which I'd always had male therapists before and they had not caught that. But it was stuff like the insecurities and troubles with emotional regulation. And all of this was coming to a head with a group of people who had their own stuff going on. And we were all sort of in crisis at the time. And it is a long and complicated story, and I don't want to air everyone's dirty laundry.
It's always hard sometimes when we're talking about polyamorous relationships. You're like, how am I only just airing my dirty laundry?
Yeah.
Where do the boundaries around my dirty laundry end and other people's dirty laundry begin?
I will say that the person who I moved in with originally, it ended up being a really bad dynamic, and they're no longer in any of our lives.
I see.
And basically in the middle of 2021, after I moved out, and I sort of separated myself from everyone else. I love you guys. I need my own space because this is just my self-esteem has just taken such a massive hit from all of this. And they sort of disappeared in the summer of 2021. And I think I had been telling everyone else that this person was terrible, and sharing my experiences, but they didn't quite believe me until it happened to them too. And so once I was able to sort of separate myself from that dynamic and sort of take care of myself and then tend to my individual relationships with my partner and his partner, it just got so much better. And it was really one of those things where it's okay, I was just telling myself I just need to be secure in myself and be good being alone and like be good with what my relationship is with my long-term partner, and just really focusing on myself. Yeah, and that's how I was able to sort of find stability again.
I love that story, and I think in it there's a challenge to another false assumption that people have about solo poly folks, that they don't want intimacy.
Oh yeah.
And in all over that story, I actually hear you being really interested in and curious about intimacy and trying to find dynamics that work for you and the other people that you're intimate with.
Yeah, I ended up finding something with my partner that worked really well, and then my metamor, his other partner, and I are now like amazing friends and are raising this child together. But it really did take just me being on my own to figure that out. And yeah, we found something that worked for a few years, and we broke up in the fall, but I think it's all for the best, and now we have this great co-parenting relationship. I'm still very close with my metamor, so
yeah. And it's also just one of those stories of polyamory being able to embrace change, that there is a kind of acceptance of being able to stay in relationship as relationships change, which I think is one of the things about polyamory that I most appreciate.
Yeah, and also like being an example of a person who's solo poly and having a family is like really cool and kind of inspiring too.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What about you, Tyson? Can you tell us about your journey?
Yeah, so if you think about the person that is like best set up for solo polyamory, I'm the exact opposite of that person. To go back a little bit, I was raised in a fundamental Christian religion, very, very radical. I was homeschooled growing up. So I never really, everything that I was meant to believe or taught to be was told to me. There was no encouragement for self-expression. There was no encouragement for self-discovery. It was everything was just given to me. And I developed like really a false view of who I was, and I became something that I would never want to be now. And then I got married at 20. I went from my parents' house to getting married. I was still very religious at the time. And I kind of struggled with very porous boundaries in terms of like taking on, I kind of explain sometimes that I feel like I'm a sponge that kind of soaks in the beliefs and opinions of people around me, because that's kind of how I was raised. I was raised to not trust myself and to really just absorb what other people are telling me. So throughout my Christian upbringing, throughout my young adult life, like I was very much everyone else and never truly myself. And towards the end of the past 10 years, I started to develop a lot of depression, a lot of like lack of joy in anything, really struggling to like just feel in touch with myself. And it was really challenging, and I just really didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. It's a simple thing of like, do I want to go on a walk today? Was really difficult for me to decide. So I'm like, I don't know what I want. And I got anxious and stressed. So like, I just didn't have my own sense of self. I wasn't grounded. And so I ended my marriage about a year ago. And it was a really good thing for me because I needed to really figure out myself. And so that is why I'm doing solo polyamory. Even though I don't know if this is going to be something I could do long term, because I'll probably get into it later, but with my anxious attachment, it is really challenging for me sometimes. But I'm doing it right now to build a sense of independence, to get to know myself again without the potential enmeshment and entanglement of a nested relationship. Because people who are too close to me, I do have a hard time with that. I am not very good at saying the word, but like differentiation. I'm not good at separating myself from the people around me necessarily. And so having that distance is something that I need, even though it's painful probably in a good way. So that's why I'm solo polyamorous. And I think it's actually a really wonderful way to do it, because I still get to explore relationships. I still get to start to build solid connections while also healing. And I actually have a theory that I think that doing it this way after a long-term relationship can be really healthy, because I'm able to navigate relationships on a smaller level, like more contained level. And it's really been pushing me to really question to really work through a lot of my anxious attachment tendencies, and it's been really, really lovely. And I think like the coolest thing about this, and this is small for most people, but like the really coolest thing about this journey for me has been, I know what color of drapes I want to have in my house at some point. Like the little things of like knowing what I want about something, knowing what feels good, has been really beautiful. Like, so for me, solo poly is more about personal development and growth, and it's a place in life that I'm at right now because I'm intentionally choosing it. And I may at some point nest again but I don't know. I may really love this, and because there are pieces of it that I'm really enjoying. So we'll just have to see what the future holds. But that's kind of why I'm solely polyamorous, and that's kind of my journey towards it.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm really glad we had both of you on at the same time because those are such different stories and such different experiences. Like, you know, I hear Rozie is like going through a lot of stuff and kind of like finding it as a identity or like a place that works for you after trying a lot of different things. And Tyson, you were saying like you did a lot of other things, and now you're like, oh, I need to try this to like kind of like as a test or like as a journey to like kind of find yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What color are the drapes?
So I love. I think.
And
earthy
does the carpet match them?
Come on.
Okay, so I think probably like I really like earthy tones with like some bright greens. Definitely like having like more of a nature look and things like that. So I really like darker grays, even though a lot of people think that's boring. I don't really care. I like it. And then with some sharp greens, probably what I like. So I don't know. I think depending on the drapes, I think green probably would be best. But yeah, depends on the rest of everything else in the house.
It sounds lovely. It sounds very Pacific Northwest.
It's definitely very Pacific Northwest.
Love it.
Speaking of intention, you brought a lot of intention to that answer.
Also, I just think it's funny that you mentioned that this gray thing, because I was just writing in Love at the End of the World about I went through a period where every man I dated, all their sheets were gray. And I was like, why do men always have gray sheets?
I don't know.
So, I don't know.
Just a back question about your journey. You and before your marriage ended, you were non-monogamous for a while, right?
Yeah.
So this is not your first. Being solo poly is not your first foray into non-monogamy.
No, definitely not. No, it wasn't a whole lot of time. It was about 6 months of it. But it was, I definitely was nested and doing non-monogamy for a while.
Yeah.
Interesting is right. Okay, so I want to dive into Tyson's story too.
Okay. Dive in. I feel like this is like everybody. I guess the audience knows a whole bunch of things about us, and you guys do too. I feel like it's just unfair that we're asking them all these vulnerable questions.
No, it's fine. I don't mind.
But they get to ask us questions in the second.
Okay,
don't worry.
Cool.
Well, we got put on the hot seat too. I guess just this idea of solo poly as a sort of tool of exploring codependency and enmeshment and boundaries is really fascinating to me and interesting, and it makes me wonder about this question of solo poly as a permanent identity or a transient identity and whether or not that matters. So I just wondered if the two of you wanted to weigh in on that.
On whether or not it matters, and on whether it's a lifestyle, like it's
it's an identity, a lifestyle, a moment, a commitment.
I'm kind of on the fence on whether I view polyamory in general as an identity or not. I think that's something that's a big conversation. I think I don't know, but I think for me, like I don't think it matters. I mean, I think it's who we are in the moment. I think we're all very fluid, and even the most solo poly person may not always be solo poly. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in the solo poly community would feel very strongly that it is an identity and that it is not a flexible thing, but I think that identities many of them are inherently squishy.
Yeah.
And like I can say what I'll want, but it might change in 10 years, you just never know.
And that idea of change also as being kind of central to what is compelling about non-monogamy is that it's a framework where you are allowed to change and grow in accordance with like where you are in your life and where other people are too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alex,
I want to ask this question about so you have both dated people who are both other solo poly people and people who are in couples. I'm curious about like the differences between the experiences of dating solo poly people.
So many differences.
Yeah, let's hear.
Right, lay it on us. We're ready.
Okay. Well, I think probably the way I would say it is like there's an openness in terms of like. So I don't necessarily believe in the escalator, but I do believe in escalating. I do think it's important. I think it's okay to escalate in an intentional way with someone, but I think when you're dating someone who's already nested, like there's a lot of limitations on where it's almost like there's like this. It's like a not necessarily a boundary on the relationship, but like there's this wall where like, oh, you can't go this way, so you have to go someplace else. So like in terms of certain kinds of intimacy, like sleeping together, or like sleeping in. If I wanted to sleep in my couple partner's bed with them, that's something that's not going to happen, right? Potentially. So it's
that might be a boundary that they
that's maybe a boundary that they have, and so like, and that's fine. But it just it really I think does kind of not necessarily limit, but it does put some boundaries on like how close I can be with that person, or how certain intimate acts and locations limits of where those things can happen. I guess if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I'm the kind of person that like what I liked about my monogamy was sleeping together, was waking up together, was brushing our teeth together. Like a lot of those things were things I really loved. I loved that, and those are things I can't necessarily always have with someone who's nested, right? And so I think that's what I would say, and I think I can sleep over at their house relatively quickly, and it's not a huge deal, and like there's just a lot more to navigate, I feel like.
Yeah, you're not navigating like the needs of a third party necessarily, and
I love this face. What is coming? I can't wait.
It's really nice not to feel like your partner has to get home to someone, right? Or that someone's going to be disappointed if they're late, or that you might accidentally like cross a line without meaning to. It's also really nice to not like say you're dating someone who is polyamorous, but their partner is not dating other people. It can be. There's like this voice, this negative monogamous voice to me that's like, oh, you're the other woman. Like, you know, and it's just really nice if you can kind of be on equal footing. I've dated people who like their spouse wasn't comfortable meeting with me for a long time, which doesn't feel great. I don't know, there's just a lot of little things, and like Tyson said, the freedom of just being able to decide where you go with a relationship with just that one person, and not having to take another person into account is really refreshing. But I feel like out there, most like non-monogamous people are married or in very committed relationships, and so it can kind of feel like we're lacking options here. And we end up working with a lot of people who are married, and it can be difficult.
Yeah, it sounds difficult.
Yeah.
No, I think the only thing I want to add is the equality piece, because like when I date someone who's nested, especially if they've been nested for a long time, maybe they co-parent together, they own a home together, they share finances, and they have a lot of that like typical monogamy relationship where I think our culture tends to look at that as like this. The way I examine it is like it's this big beautiful castle with these nice flags and beautiful windows, and like this big thing that is propped up in our society of like, oh, this is a relationship, right? And I'm on the other end of that, not being able to have a lot of those elements, and it can be kind of challenging to not compare to that. So I think comparison can be an issue for me sometimes, where it's like dating someone who's solo, it's like we are on the same level, we're building something unique together. There's not like this massive propped up relationship, at least by society's terms, that I'm having to like navigate with them. So, yeah.
It sounds like there's just a feeling of kind of inequity baked into the dynamic.
Yeah, and I have to be careful because, again, my anxious attachment, a lot of these things are things I have to process, because it's like, again, married for 10 years, used monogamy as a tool to make me feel more secure. So when I see someone have all of those elements in a relationship with someone else and I don't, that can kind of, the alarm goes off in my brain of, hey, something's wrong, this isn't okay, like you're not safe. And that's like, again, the monogamous paradigm that I'm trying to still shift from. So this is all from my experience.
I see.
Yeah.
And so you're saying like, yes, there's some inequity here, and there are cultural elements to that, and also you're like, there are personal things here about, can I feel safe and not centered
Absolutely.
in this way, and that's an existential question.
Yeah,
almost.
I think both are true. I think there's an inequality. I think there's a pretty large power dynamic, and then also I have my own sense of insecure attachment stuff that I work through.
That makes me curious about hierarchy and solo poly, and I was wondering if like you all could just weigh in on that for a second. Like folks who are solo poly, practicing hierarchical non-monogamy versus not practicing hierarchical non-monogamy, and how does that factor in as you think about power and equity?
Yeah, my favorite way to break that down as someone who was in a 5-year relationship and was pretty enmeshed in some ways and not in others is like de facto versus de jure hierarchy. So like hierarchy that just happens as a matter of course. Like, oh, you've been with this person for X amount of years, you have this reputation together and you have a rapport rather, and so you have certain things that like a brand new relationship with a third person is not going to have.
So I love this language. It's super helpful. I feel like this is a concept that I've been trying to find language for. De facto and de jure hierarchy. De facto being the kind of centering of or, context of a long-term relationship, which is going to have hierarchy inside of it.
It's just what is.
It is what is.
Yeah.
And a new relationship isn't going to come in and be able to equally match that because it has to do with depth and time.
Yeah.
And du jour hierarchy is, would you help me with that one?
It's rules. It's de jure being the law, like of the law. I don't know if that's the exact Latin translation or whatever, but yeah.
I don't know what I
I dated a lawyer for a long time.
That's funny. I was thinking of like soup du jour, so it was like the rule of the day, the hierarchy of the day.
Got it.
Maybe I'm wrong, but
It's like what's enforced by by the partner saying like you can't do this thing.
Do you find that folks who are in couples who you date have a sense of that distinction of de jure versus de facto, or an analysis of hierarchy?
Not always. Not until I tell them what it is.
I'll bet.
Yeah, I mean, part of like being in this dating scene right now, it's a lot of married people opening up their relationships.
Absolutely, yeah.
And a lot of those people do not have sort of the background, and they haven't done their readings. And I don't want to say you can't be non-monogamous without doing the readings, but like, I mean, I don't think you should be in any sort of relationship without being a nerd about it somehow, right? Like, and there is stuff like that where they're like, oh, I didn't even think about having boundaries with my partner,
Yeah.
I would say that the majority of clients, couples and relationship clients that I work with now fit that description. They are people who have been monogamous and are opening up. I mean, there is just no doubt that that is a trend right now. And I think it's especially a trend in Seattle and sort of surrounding area. And there is just... we're on a podcast right now that was called Mistakes Were Made, in part because I think there are some mistakes that people do just make.
Yeah.
And that you learn from doing, and as you dismantle assumptions about monogamy, there is a little bit of messiness that comes with that. For a couple that's been monogamous for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, they're opening up, and you can totally see how they'd be like, well, this is crazy. Of course we're going to have rules. And you can also see how folks who have been doing it for a while are like, those rules are going to hurt a lot of people, including you.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that people want to be... The instinct for a lot of people opening their relationships or marriages is that they want to be free. And that's like what the trend is like a sense that people want to be freed of the rules that are constraining them. But they also want to be safe, and like so they're trying to hang on to the safety, and like then they're interacting with people who have already foregone that safety for whatever, and like the journeys that you all described were like journeys of either not having that safety in the first place or kind of like letting it go or losing it or whatever, and so it's like I could see how coming from that position it's frustrating to like have to walk people through or drag people through or suffer through people holding on to that safety and being like, no, but my relationship has these rules. Yeah. And those rules are them clutching on to that safety. Like,
well, I think one thing I want to make a point to say is that like, I think it's okay to normalize that mistakes happen. Mistakes are okay. We all make mistakes, but like messing up when you're dealing with like attachment and we're dealing with someone that you like, someone who loves you, like I think like it's I don't know. It can be really hurtful and painful. I've known people in my life specifically who have been incredibly hurt based upon couples who are not ready and they're not exploring it. And so like, I wish that couples would wait a bit before really opening up, and because I do think that like who's being hurt when mistakes are being made. I think that's a question I have. And I'm sure that, you know, if you're a couple dating people who are also opening up, you deal with the same thing. This isn't just probably a solo poly experience, just maybe an experienced poly person dating somebody who's less experienced, like who's getting hurt by the messing up. And I think that deserves some recognition and some,
accountability is what I hear. And I think like we cannot avoid mistakes.
Right.
That we can't. And especially around intimacy and liberation, safety and exploration and dismantling systems of oppression, right, that are deeply ingrained. We are going to fuck up. Are you accountable when you do? I think that is the big difference for me, is like, do you repair? Do you acknowledge where you're accountable? Do you think about the power differentials? That is all I feel like we can reasonably ask from people. And it's funny that this would come up, because I had like a minor, we call it a conflict, maybe a disagreement with a fellow therapist who was asking me about my suggestion for folks who are opening up, that at a certain point you do just have to try it. There will be, believe it or not, despite what it feels like out there, there are people who will be contemplating this and for years and incredibly anxious as they do it. And there's a lot of conflict, and there's a lot of like exploring of scenarios and hypotheticals, and then like big blowouts around what might happen in those hypotheticals. And I do feel like you got to dip your toe in at some point. You've got to try on what this feels like, and go from there, in part because I feel like sometimes in the over prep is where you get a lot of these rules about possible hypotheticals. So it's just kind of interesting to consider, what is this balance between learning through doing, mistakes and accountability, and who gets hurt.
I just wonder about like, how do you how does accountability work in relationships? Because there's that like all's fair in love, and I don't even want to finish this because the second half of that is
a horrible saying.
I hate it.
It's not all fair in war.
No.
But, like when you're in relationships, like how do they end? Like in a small community, perhaps there is accountability in relationships, but like when somebody does you wrong in a romantic relationship, you know, you break up. And I think then one of the things that I appreciate about non-monogamy in general is that there's a vision that you're not aggrieved with every person that a relationship ends with, and you don't just hate every person that you break up with. But when I first asked that question a minute ago that started this conversation, like, what are the differences? I thought that you were going to say, like, the answer wasn't, I thought there was going to be some good things and some bad things about dating solo poly people, and it was basically just a supply and demand question, and it sounds like you would rather be dating solo poly people in general.
Sometimes.
I mean,
but there's not enough of them around.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I imagine if they were more solo poly people, we'd probably be like, you know what, we already have some really like long-term like relationships that have a lot more like time. We have more time together, a lot of freedom. So I think it'd be more open to dating people who are coupled, because maybe they're not as available, and maybe you're not as available now because you have other relationships. I think it is supply and demand.
There's an economy there. Yeah.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, but I do want to comment on the accountability thing a little bit. Because I think that I don't think it's an experienced polyamorous person to hold their partner accountable necessarily. What I think I would like to see more of is accountability within polyamorous media and polyamorous like instructing and polyamorous like podcasts and things like that. Kind of what you guys are doing today. Like I think, because what I see more or less is all, and this is just my perspective, I could completely be wrong about this, but so many of the books, so much of the podcasts are all about how do you open up your relationship and make sure how do you protect your relationship as you open up? How do you make sure you still love your partner as you open up? How do you continue to love each other while opening up? And there's not as much a conversation around how do you not fuck up other people's lives while opening up, right? what responsibility do you have? I think that taking accountability for the power, there's not enough conversation on power imbalances. And that's like the power that the nested partner has over the other relationship sometimes, I think, needs to be more evident. And I think in our media, couples privilege is a big thing in terms of catering to couples who are opening.
Yeah, I've had people. I've been dating guys, and their wife called them in the middle of the date and said, "I need you to do XYZ," and they left the date to go do that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, wow, you have no sense of boundaries and no sense of how, like, the fact that we just sat down at my favorite restaurant to have a meal and then you left before the food even came is like harmful for me. And you know, like, why are you saying yes to these requests? You know, and like, what relationship agreements happened behind the scenes that I'm not aware of? You know, and it's stuff like that where, like, I will ask for a little thing, and the spouse will be used as an excuse to not.
Triangulation.
I need to show up for them. Yeah. I actually, we listened to your podcast on triangulation, so that was fun. It's like, oh yeah, very relatable.
It is, and it shows up a lot in these dynamics.
Yeah,
where people are not taking responsibility for their own behavior, or being accountable in that way. And I hear these stories too, and I have actually experienced some of it in my own way, different power differentials. And I'm just like, damn, that's fucking rude.
Yeah,
like,
it's really rude.
It's fucking rude. In what world is there any excuse for treating someone like that and then just being like, sorry, my wife needed it, so that's what I did. You know, there's like something else happening there that is very alarming to me, and I think speaks to this, like, just not enough self-awareness to be doing this.
It's upsetting to me because I like to think of myself as someone with good judgment who dates people with good judgment, but then stuff like that happens and it's like, oh, okay, I'm fallible too. Like, I made a misjudgment here by dating you.
Yeah, and what leverage do you really have?
None. Like, the one person who left the restaurant, it was the second time that something like that had happened, and I called it off after that. I was like, I don't... Like, you're not putting anything into this relationship. I'm not going to put myself out there and, like, potentially embarrass myself and be vulnerable with you in order to work through this with you. Like, this is just not going to work out, you know? Like, and I would like to have a relationship where we can work through things together.
Yeah. And I think that informs the vibes out there in the world, in the dating world as well, that even, I think, like, coupled people suffer from that too, because, like, there's just kind of, like, bad faith. Like, I think you having that experience, or, like, solo poly, or anybody having that experience, means that, like, you're just, like, those vibes are out there, and then, like, there's a distrust, right, like, amongst everybody in the sort of, like, dating pool before you get to know people. That, you know, I've definitely felt that, like, going into first dates and second dates, just people being like, is this gonna just be terrible? Because people have had terrible experiences like that.
Are you meeting people online mostly, or yeah.
I mean, thankfully not currently, like, because it's not very fun.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm off of the apps now too, thank goodness. But
yeah, and I think this accountability piece is really interesting, and how you build awareness. So there's, like, some harm reduction. You know, like, mistakes were made, or people are going to fuck up. That also is something that exists on a spectrum, right?
Totally.
And I think there's harm reduction to be done there. And something that I feel like comes up is, do you make a point of opening up and only dating folks that are in similar situations? So I'll be frank. This is advice that people sometimes seek from me personally in community, and also as a therapist, where they're like, should I only, like, date married people with kids, people within a few years of my age, so that power differential is not as great? And I think it's an interesting question that I'm not always sure how to answer, and I'm wondering how you all might respond.
I think if that's what you're looking for, like, I think, like, if you're really busy, then maybe you should be upfront about that and only date other people who are really busy, like other parents, for instance. But I think it's again a squishy thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think just being open and honest and upfront about it. I think even, like, with the idea of, like, couples just trying it, just jumping in, like, as long as they're open and honest with the people that they're dating, that, like, this is what I have to give, like, this is what is going on. There's a chance that this may not work. I think that is probably the one thing that's important, because then that gives people like us the ability to be like, okay, yeah, I don't want to get involved with this, or okay, that sounds good. But I think also knowing what you do have to give is important too.
Right.
You know?
Which requires self-awareness.
Yeah.
Let's take a break.
Okay, sounds good. Welcome back, everybody. That was a really nice interlude where we talked about aquariums. Plugged our new podcast, The Age of Aquarium, coming soon. So we realized that in this wonderful conversation that we've had so far, we have been talking a lot about heartbreak, disappointment, and the things that feel like don't work. And it made me want to ask the two of you, what does work when it comes to building relationships that feel satisfying and reciprocal and deepening across the divide of being solo poly and being coupled? Silence.
Accountability.
Accountability, yeah. Tell me more about that.
I'm currently dating someone who's doing a great job at it, even though he's married, and he has just been like thinking about like how he can dismantle hierarchy in sort of practical ways, and like ways to sort of make me feel important too. And I think being clear about like what I need as well has just having that dialogue there without like defensiveness, and with an openness to sort of opportunity and change has been really nice. So like things like he and his wife went on a really nice vacation last year, and then, you know, I've known him for a long time, and so can we go on a vacation sometime? You know, and stuff like that, because I'm kind of used to being the person who gets left behind on vacations, and so just like having someone who's open to stuff like that is really nice. And then in my long-term relationship, the one who is I'm parenting with now, we kind of came up with creative ways of sort of helping things feel a little nicer, because, you know, they moved in together without me, and that was sort of a sore spot for a while, but we talked about it together, and like they decided that they would have an open door policy where I could come over literally any time. And I didn't really take them up on it. Like, I have my own house and I don't want to just barge in. But now that we have a baby together, like, yeah, I'll just walk over anytime. And that's really nice. We actually, so parenting together, I don't know, there's just so many opportunities, and when you're kind of stuck in this, like, it's a married couple and then there's a third person and you're stuck in that paradigm, it's so limiting. But when you can actually like get creative and decide, like, we just throw that all away, like, what do we actually want our lives to look like? And that's how we ended up co-parenting together. And I'm not a legal parent of our older child, because she already has two legal parents, but I am a legal parent of our baby. And that's just a way that we figured out to sort of balance the power there. We also, the most poly thing ever, we made a corporation, and we haven't used it yet, but it's just a way that we could all like put in money and like have like a sort of a 3 adult thing where we're all sort of contributing, and then we can take funds out of it for the children and stuff like that. So that's been cool.
I love all of that. We also have a corporation.
Yeah. Who would have thought the solution to all of this would be more corporations? Yeah, so like a lot of creativity, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And collaboration.
Creativity and collaboration.
And just being in touch with what you want, right, both you individually and as a group.
Yeah, and sort of letting go of the old paradigms as much as you can, and building community together, even with like your partner's spouse, you know, and being open to that. I feel like it has a lot of opportunity there.
I really appreciate that you said that. I feel like that is, at least for me personally, has been the point of entry into being more collaborative and open in the way we are polyamorous. love meeting your partners, and you've always been really open to meeting my partners. I love meeting my partners' partners. It feels like an antidote to some of this stuff, a really accessible antidote.
Absolutely.
And it's something that I recommend to people whenever I can.
Yeah, do you have any advice for your... I mean, I guess for your metas, but yeah, for people in couples getting used to, or like kind of relating to their partners, or like how they should approach that if it's kind of their first time.
Yeah, something that my more long-term partner did when we were all ready when everyone was ready to meet each other. It wasn't just me, but it was, everyone wanted to meet. Is he would like go and get coffee with them and just have like a coffee date with them one-on-one, and then the initial like startup conversation would be like, how cool is this person that we share? And then they would sort of naturally bond over that, and then they could sort of branch out from there. I'm not sure. I know, Tyson, you had an experience with this very recently.
Oh, yeah. So. I met my meta like Thursday.
How'd it go? If you want to share.
It was great. It was, it's the way I describe it to people. It's like imagining meeting someone who like shares like the same passion for a similar hobby. That's maybe a unique hobby. Like you get really excited. It's like, oh yeah, I love this person too. You love this person. What do you love about them? Oh, I love that person. I love that too. Like it's like there's just a bond I think that comes with it. That's really nice. And I wish that more people would explore that. It is scary. It's intimidating. But like, I don't know. For me, once you talk with them, like it's just really, really lovely and really nice. So I do think that I agree that like having that connection is important.
Yeah, I had a meta who asked me to like write a song about the person like for her birthday that we were both dating. And like that's like a thing that I do. Like I'm a musician and he was not, and it was like at the time I was like had to really like push myself to like want to do it, but like in retrospect it was like really sweet that he like came up with that idea and like kind of like came to me in the like realm that like I was like, the thing that I did and was like wanted to do that.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
that's really, really cool. I like that.
Something my ex really loved scavenger hunts, and so my meta and I would plan scavenger hunts together for him, and cool. That was a really good bonding activity and also something that he really loved.
Yeah.
What else would you say works for deepening relationships and intimacy, Tyson, when you're dating someone who's in a couple?
I think so. I have a couple thoughts on this. Two. We've talked a lot of them already, but the first one is like, I think there needs to be an awareness around the power that's in the power imbalance, and I think that like the coupled. What I appreciate, because I've been in some really wonderful relationships with people who are coupled, and I'm in one right now. I think the biggest thing is like there's an awareness of that dynamic, and so I think like as a couple, nested couple, making sure that like you both have the opportunity to like spend time with the person who's not nested, like maybe even like being willing to like, hey, I'll leave the house today, or leave the house whenever you want to if you want to have your partner over for dinner or something, or have your partner over, like being able to like find ways to empower that relationship outside of the nested relationship. I think is really important, and I think it is as simple as like, you want to go on a trip? That's fine. Like, yeah, go on a trip. Like, I'll be okay with that. I think, like, trying to encourage the partner who's dating the person who's not nested.
And for that not to be a combative, frightened kind of dynamic, but instead one where the meta wants this relationship to work and wants to
exactly. The meta's like, hey, you want to let me know when you want to have this person over for dinner, and I will go do something with my friends, and like, just let me know when you want them to come over. That kind of empowerment I think is important. But I think for me, the second thing of like building closeness, and this is really on the relationship itself, not necessarily having to do with the nested couple, but like building and integrating life, I guess. And I think it's like, and that can be as simple as like cooking together or staying over the night and then having coffee in the morning and going shopping together. Like sometimes when we're not living with someone, we don't get that unintentional time, that passive time of just doing life together. So I think that like I went grocery shopping with my partner, and it was so much fun. I had just a blast, and it was lovely. And like that's something that like we like to do together because it's a way to build like our own thing. outside of that, and I think integrating friendships is important too. So like having your own social circle with that one partner that's outside of the social circle that they have with their nested partner. So I think really just building a life with someone, and finding ways to do that. Like I think I've heard of even staycations together. Like, hey, come over for the weekend and like we'll just live together for the weekend and we'll do the things that the couples do when they're living together. Like, because I do think there's a bonding and an intimacy that goes with that shared journey and that shared adventure. So I think those things are really cool. But like, just going on an adventure together, whatever that might be.
Would you and your partner like to do my grocery shopping together?
Probably.
I just want to offer that up. I feel like it would help.
I'm not good at grocery
I
shopping.
hate grocery shopping.
I'm all over the
grocery
place.
It's my least favorite.
Yeah.
God.
So probably not.
Okay, fine. Well, it was worth a try.
I think the idea is they want to eat the food together.
Oh, I
as well.
see.
That is it.
They just like have a TaskRabbit account together that they.
Exactly.
Alex, you brainstormed a couple of other things that you had
Oh yeah. I mean, I think
worked for you and people you were dating.
Well, because we were talking about like the way there's like are these symbols of closeness that couples sometimes have, like spending holidays together or like vacations, and then sometimes those feel like inaccessible in whatever secondary relationships, quote unquote. So we were talking about like things that we have done with other partners, like going on psychedelic journeys together, or hosting dinner parties, or like doing like creative projects
exploring
together.
kink.
Yeah, definitely. I think making up your own holidays that you can spend with a specific person, because it is holiday season is hard. But I like that, exploring kink. I think finding ways to explore something together. My partner is really big into painting, and it's something I haven't done a whole lot of, but it's something I started to enjoy doing with her, and it's like, this is actually a lot of fun. So it's like I am excited about doing that more with her. So things like that. I love what you said, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about how sometimes those things that you can feel like kind of like envious of in a long term or like a coupled relationship are also like, there's a lot of weight to them or like obligation to them as well.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes you can like explore something new that feels kind of like free and exploratory with a different partner. That's like, can sometimes be nice that you get to go and do something completely different.
So not Sunday dinner with the in-laws.
Yeah,
is what you're
exactly.
Saying. You're saying you don't want to do that more with other people.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No, it's
all of my other partners are lucky that they have not
Yeah.
met my parents, perhaps.
Yeah.
I've dated a lot of people, and I really enjoyed like just seeing what each relationship can sort of turn into, and like what do you like doing together? Do you go backpacking together? Are you trained to climb a mountain together? Are you going on walks in the arboretum? Are you walking your dogs? What are you reading books and talking about that, or watching movies? Like, and each relationship is going to have its own special flavor, and I think that's really like leading into that. It's really lovely.
Yeah.
I want to add to what you said about like the in-law thing. There is a level of like, we don't have to. This is a good thing about solo poly is like we don't have to necessarily deal with the stressful logistics of dishes or finances or raising kids together. Like there is, even though in that alone I have some level of jealousy, because I do think those things will over time create intimacy and trust, and are powerful for growing a relationship. But it is nice not to worry about that. I had a partner complain about the dishes they had a fight about dishes, and I'm like, oh, that's nice, I don't have to worry about that. So
Yeah.
My sink is exactly as dirty as I left it.
Yeah. That's true.
All right, that seems like a good segue into our lightning round.
So Jessica, you're the host,
I'm the host. Okay,
and
great.
you're going to ask us questions.
I guess the host can't win the game show.
That's
Sorry.
kind of all.
Through corruption.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, there you go. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, skim some off the top.
Age of Aquarium, Han Solo's.
And there's not actually
Incredible.
scoring. So nobody's going to win.
Judge.
We'll do a little Instagram
really
poll when we post it and see who won.
Oh no.
Okay, well, this first question is for the age of Aquarium. And what we want to know is, what sounds great about being solo poly?
You want to go first?
Okay, I'll go first. I think the dishes thing, the idea that your house would look the same as the way you left it, sounds fucking amazing. And that you didn't have to answer to anybody about how you were spending your time. And you could spend a bunch of time by yourself doing whatever the hell you wanted and not have to clear it with anybody. And you wouldn't have to, like, answer for it to anyone.
You just stole her answer and my answer, which was going to be doing exactly what you want all the time. Yeah. Okay.
Han Solo's response.
Yeah, I think that's very, very... it's very true. It's very nice. Don't have to worry about that. And I think I can present my home in a way I want to, so I can clean up really nicely for people so they think it's beautiful all the time. But then like, the rest of the time when no one's around, I can just keep it really messy. So it's like, see, I can create a false image for myself, which is nice.
Are we answering what sounds great about being solo poly, or what sounds... Now, are we answering what sounds great about being couple?
First, you're just responding
Responding to their
Oh.
response, and then
Was our response
Yeah.
accurate?
Well, yeah, and you can still stay on your... We just have to share this with you.
Oh, yeah. Sounds great.
Wait, I have a follow-up question for Tyson. Did you actually get these drapes that are exactly the
not
drapes
yet.
that you want?
I'm going to. Going to. But I've been thinking about it
You
more
can
and
have
more.
your own place, yeah.
When I have I live with 4 other people right now, so
okay.
I don't have it just yet, but I will soon.
It's exciting.
Yes.
We'll bring you back on the show once that happens.
Sounds good.
We'll do a
Okay.
full
Sounds
show
good.
about the drapes.
Although I'm feeling, questioning the gray thing now after what you guys said. So we'll see. I don't want to be like every other guy out there.
You gotta go peacock like mine. Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Hell yeah.
Okay, well, next question is for the Han Solos, which is what sounds great about being coupled.
I think probably like I'm a sucker for like the simple things like brushing teeth together, cuddling at night together, having someone to sleep with every single night. I think it sounds really nice. And the passive time. I also think like the shared adventure and the investment that goes with that. So
Yeah, I think domestic bliss and having your person.
Are we supposed to respond to how that sounds to us? Yeah, that is so interesting. It's really beautiful to hear it reflected like that. And I wouldn't say that like domestic bliss is what it feels like the majority of the time. You have moments of that, and that's really like wonderful. But
You literally get mad at me if I brush my teeth without you.
okay, well that makes me sound insane.
Cute, actually.
What's going on here?
You like treat it as a betrayal.
I thought that was a running joke.
Yeah, it is a joke, but still, it is interesting that this comes up.
This comes up, yeah.
Yeah, so accurate. Nailed it.
right.
10 points.
Okay, well, so another question for you two. What is the most annoying thing about non-monogamous coupled people?
Like a lack of boundaries and arbitrary rules.
Yeah. I think this is going to sound really terrible, and like I fully recognize that this is like probably a me problem more than anything, but they are so whiny about spending one night away from their partner. Oh my gosh. Just one night.
Oh wow. Okay. Oh wow.
I'm just going to throw that one out there.
Oh, he said it. Shit.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, heavy agree over here with Rozie. I think like the boundaries and arbitrary rules, you're right, we're the worst with that stuff. And it's just so self-referential. Totally.
Yeah, I don't think that we have arbitrary rules anymore. But we have had them at times.
And people, like
Couples
non-monogamous
do, yes.
couple people
Yeah.
definitely do that. Yeah.
What does the lack of boundaries part mean?
Like,
Like too many boundaries, right?
you can have too many boundaries. I think a boundary is something you set for yourself, right? And so if you don't have a boundary like with your partner about like calling me on dates for things that are not emergencies, stuff like that.
Lack of individual boundaries
Yes.
between the couple.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. This is like exactly what I want to talk. We're going to do a a lecturer or whatever at Evergreen Hearts, and that's like what I want the theme of it to be.
Fun.
Is like having your own boundaries, not like your boundaries as a couple, but like going into non-monogamy with your own boundaries.
Yeah.
And the focus of it is talking to couples who are opening up after having been monogamous for a long time. That's the audience for it. So.
And since we're plugging things, it's on May
Something.
May something.
It sure is.
May
We're just
13th.
There are a lot of plugs in there.
Evergreen Hearts is great.
Yeah. And I think that triangulation that you're talking about, that couples are often doing that and not taking responsibility for their own relationships outside of their coupledom. So I 100% agree with that. Tyson.
It's on May 9th.
May 9th. You said this about people being whiny, people in couples being whiny about spending the night and how hard it is when we went to coffee, and I have just been fuming about it ever since. I've like mentioned it like 5 times.
It's true.
I admit it's fully problematic on my end, but it's just a little irritation with because I do think that sometimes prevents me from maybe spending as much time with a partner as I might want to. It's like they're trying to protect their other partner, and it's fine. I get it. I was married for 10 years, and I know it's problematic, but it's just, you asked what irritates me, or it was annoying, and that can be a little annoying sometimes when I hear it. So.
Right. Yeah, and you're right. For you and your perspective, you're like, I am navigating spending nights on my own all the time. I don't understand why this is such a fucking thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I understand why, because I've done it. But yeah, it is hard for me to not spend as much. I usually want to spend more time with people that I get, and so it is a struggle for me. It's one of the bigger struggles I have, is just time with a partner. And so yeah, it's a little bit like weird to hear about someone who gets every single night with them except for one night, and then I'm struggling to get not having the other 6 or whatever.
You know what I'm realizing as we're talking?
What?
Is that this is not an issue between me and Alex. It's an issue between me and my partners, in the sense that I am slow to feel comfortable spending the night with people. And this is just very slow.
Yeah.
Like, slower than I would like to even admit to folks. It's just super intimate to me, and it feels really vulnerable. And so I think sometimes I use our relationship as cover for not doing it. When in fact, it's not like Alex would ever give me any kind of grief about
Alex looks betrayed.
spending the night with someone, right?
Wow. Broke the podcast rule. Don't read my face. No, I probably wouldn't give you grief about spending the night. I was actually over here thinking about what it is for me is that when you have kids, so much stuff happens between 6 a.m. and noon or whatever. It's like whole lives are lived. So usually it's like at some point, like we used to do more overnight stuff, and then I just was like, it's just like so much. It's like there's such a big cost that I was like, it's not really worth it.
Yeah.
Because it's just like so much is happening during that time that when we were doing it all out, I was just like, this is a lot.
Missing out on the kids stuff.
Yeah, missing out on it, and also it's just the burden that you're putting on your co-parent feels just kind of a lot. So it's this huge ask, whereas going out until midnight or whatever isn't really that much of one, I think. And that was kind of what was the transition for me, where I was I just don't feel like doing this anymore.
I feel like dating people who are coupled versus dating people who are coupled and have kids is a different, a lot of times a different conversation. But
Right, because really I could triangulate our 8-year-old who would be like, what do you mean you're not going to be here for breakfast?
But it's a valid complaint. I think you get 10 points for putting us on blast for that. Because, it is a lot of complaining that a couple of people
But now
do
you get to put us on blast.
Yep.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've introduced scoring now to the game.
Yeah.
That's great.
Han Solo has 10 points.
Yeah. And I think they got 10 on the last one.
Yeah.
But question for you, Age of Aquarium. What is the most annoying thing about solo poly people?
Yeah, I'm going to say when they act like they're just single people. And what I mean by that is when they sort of have all of the complaints about just dating and stuff like that aren't acknowledging that they're like they have a deliberate lifestyle of being solo poly. I don't really hear you guys doing this in this context, but sometimes people that I know who are solo poly are just like, all this stuff isn't really working out for me, and like sometimes it feels like it's being framed like I'm just not finding love, and none of these dates are working out, and I don't like really like any of these people that I'm dating, and it kind of sounds like just like a monogamous single person's complaints.
Okay.
I think for me, it's that there is a lot of care that I'm showing the relationship that maybe is not totally visible. Like, for example, with being married and having kids, if I'm figuring out over here how to go away for a weekend, right, or do a psychedelic trip or go to a sex party or any of that stuff, there are a bunch of other relationships I have to navigate to get there. It's just the reality of my life. That navigating is part of my care for this relationship with the solo poly person. And I feel like that isn't as acknowledged that way. I'm like, I'm doing that because I care about you. And then it feels like the results are never good enough.
That is a good thing to, that's a good thing to hear, I think, for me. Because I struggle with that too. Like, there's a level of toxic fairness that still exists in my mind sometimes, where I feel like because I'm able to do something, other people should be willing and able to do that same thing. And so because I have a lot of flexibility and freedom, there's a fear that there's like this expectation sometimes, like if they don't do the same for me, there's something wrong with me, or maybe they're not putting as much care in. But like, the people I date, they have a child together, they're busy, very busy people. And so like, that's a helpful thing for me to hear, and to really recognize that like them seeing me, even though it's tough for them to see me as often as I might want them to, like them setting aside that time to do it is a huge effort on their part and shows a lot of love. So I appreciate that.
Oh, I'm so glad you received it that way.
Yeah, I did.
That makes me feel so good. If someone I was dating said that to me, I would be so happy. But yeah.
Just play back the recording.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
You're like, this is how you respond.
This is how you should respond.
But it can be hard to feel like you're not getting what you want from a partnership, right? And yeah, it can be easy to miss that labor, for sure.
I think like something I've had to think about is like, okay, is this something that they're doing wrong, or is this something that maybe I need something different? That person asking, like, if they feel like they're not getting something, why is that they're not? Why are they feeling that way?
And are there other ways to get it?
Exactly.
Like, are we overly attached to like one path of getting it?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting question too.
Yeah. To go back really quick to something earlier in terms of tips, one of the things my partner and I do that is we do Marco Polos every day. So we send like little videos to each other every single day, and that's a really wonderful way to like connect on a daily basis and have the repetition. Don't know why I said that. It just popped into my head.
Yeah.
I was thinking about earlier conversation, so that's there. But it goes into what you were saying of like, is there another way you can get what you're looking for? And so if they're feeling like they're not getting that daily communication or daily like contact, like finding there's so many cool tools to do that with that are better than like texting. So
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, Marco Polo stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one last set of questions here in our lightning round. Starting with you, the Han Solos. What is the best thing about being solo poly that coupled people might be missing out on?
Freedom and free time.
yeah, I think freedom, also the ability to have people over whenever you might want to, the ability to like share parts of your life more in a more free way, I think, which is really nice. And obviously if you're like kitchen table poly, like it's a little easier to do that, but like, I think being able to, I can have whoever I want over, and I can introduce them, and I can do whatever I want with them, and not necessarily have to worry about making sure a partner at home is okay with that person coming over.
How's that sound, guys?
Yeah,
That sounds great.
Sounds similar to what we said for the first question. Yeah,
It sounds really good.
Yeah, well, what about So sort of the counterpart to that, what is the best thing about being coupled that solo poly people might be missing out on?
I'm going to go ahead and just have a one-word answer like you wanted me to. Naps. I think it is naps. With people. And because you can do it spontaneously.
Spontaneous napping. Yeah, I was going to say like infinite snuggling anytime you want. All night.
Ouch.
Yeah, that is tough. That is tough one.
Oh.
I know. Like, it hurt both ways.
Yeah.
Which means we hit on something, right?
Yeah. I think it's just like, it's just the intimacy that you get when, I think sometimes in polyamory it's understated how when you have a shared adventure with someone, when you invest energy into them and money into them, and like, you know, there's a reason why like Frodo and Sam at the end of Lord of the Rings like loved each other so much, because they'd been through so much shit together.
Yeah.
And they were still there, and they could rely on each other, they could trust each other, and like there's something really beautiful about that escalator and about that investment that I don't think polyamorous people or solo polyamorous people are always going to be able to get. I think they can get it, but like there's something really special about doing life together. And I think it's a beautiful thing that is sometimes lacking in solo polyamorous relationships, or it's harder to build.
What happened at the end of Lord of the Rings? Frodo and Sam went back to the Shire, and they live at two separate houses right next to each other. Two little hovels.
They did.
Uh-huh.
Are they solo? Is that what you're saying?
I think you could actually interpret it that way.
You could. You very well could. But it is a very good analogy of like going on an adventure together, and I think just the importance of doing that when you're solo.
Mm-hmm. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I was married for 10 years, so I experienced a lot of that to the point where it was too much and enmeshment. So now I'm like kind of comparing the two. I have like this, and then almost sometimes a yearning for elements of what was before, but then also like a pushing against some of the elements. So I'm very much in a conflicted state. I'd be very interested to know how I answer these questions in a year.
We'll bring you back.
Yeah.
You both are coming back. All right. Anything else, Jessica? How would you score us on this lightning round?
Oh, God. I mean, I know I said that I was all about winning game shows, but I feel like everybody won in this because we learned about ourselves and each other.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, this has been a really lovely experience talking with you two, and
Likewise.
Yeah.
it's
been really fun.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
I feel like the true winners were the audience.
Is there anything else we want to make sure that we plug? We had some kind of like embedded plugs, but like let's take a moment. Tell us what y'all are doing that people should get involved in.
Yeah, people in Seattle can check out the Seattle Poly Under 40 meetup.com group. I've helped facilitate discussion there. We're not doing it currently because we're doing a smaller book club right now, but we will put events back up on there soon. And then we also have a Discord that is not age limited anymore, and we will put the link in the show notes if I understand.
Yay. Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Also, so like you mentioned Evergreen Hearts earlier, they're really big on up and coming in the community, and they have a prom coming up. We're also having a newcomer social next Sunday, and then there's a connection speed dating event that's going to be happening in March. So there's a lot of things going there. And there's also like the Puget Sound Polyamory meetup page. There's a lot of events going on there. If you want to meet me, I host some of those. So yeah, those are all my plugs.
Great. Thanks, you two. Thanks for coming on and spending Monday morning with us. I really appreciate it.
It's been nice. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Mistakes Were Made. If you liked the podcast, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and follow us on Instagram at MistakesCast. Thank you, Sarah and Jessica, for engineering and for hosting the Lightning Round game show. And thank you, Rozie and Tyson, for joining us today. See you next time.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.